The American Old West was a land of boundless opportunity, rugged landscapes, and untamed frontiers. But beneath the romanticized tales of cowboys and saloons lies a darker, more sinister reality. This was a time when lawlessness ruled and justice was often as harsh as the unforgiving desert sun. From chilling acts of vengeance to spine-tingling encounters with the supernatural, the Old West has no shortage of grisly tales that still send shivers down our spines. Get ready to dive into the top 10 most gruesome stories that prove the Wild West was as wild as it was deadly. Wilbarger Scalping. In 1827, Josiah P. Wilbarger established a farm along the Colorado River. During a routine scouting expedition, he and his group were ambushed by members of the Comanche tribe. In the chaos that ensued, two of Wilbarger's companions lost their lives, while two others managed to flee and escape. Wilbarger was struck by two arrows, one in each leg, and sustained a neck wound from a bullet. Realizing his best hope for survival was to pretend he was dead, he lay completely still as the attackers drew near. Despite his effort to remain unnoticed, one of the attackers approached Wilbarger and removed his scalp. Remarkably, Wilbarger did not cry out, demonstrating incredible endurance and presence of mind. After the attackers left, he was left severely wounded and in excruciating pain. As he lay there, Wilbarger experienced vivid visions of his sister Margaret, who seemed to comfort him with the promise that help was on the way. The members of his party who had escaped the attack returned to the farm and, upon realizing Wilbarger had not followed them, set out to find him. They eventually found him and brought him back, saving his life. For over a decade after this traumatic event, Wilbarger continued with his life, wearing a specially designed cap to protect the area of his head where his scalp had been removed. He became somewhat of a local legend, known for his remarkable survival and resilience. However, his life came to a tragic end when he accidentally bumped his head against a low beam. This seemingly minor incident led to a severe infection, which ultimately claimed his life. Wilbarger's story reflects the harsh realities of frontier life, where survival often depended on both sheer luck and remarkable fortitude. His experience highlights the intense and often unpredictable nature of interactions between settlers and Native American tribes during a time when both were struggling to assert their presence in the same land. John Coulter and the Human Hunt. John Coulter was a legendary figure of the American frontier, spending much of his life exploring the untamed wilderness. In 1703, he became a member of the famous Lewis and Clark expedition, where he earned a reputation as one of the finest hunters and scouts. After the expedition ended, Coulter took up work with the Missouri Fur Company. He was tasked with scouting ahead to warn Native American tribes of the company's approach and to establish peaceful trade relations. Coulter's explorations took him deep into uncharted territory, and he is widely believed to have been the first white man to lay eyes on Jackson Hole and Yellowstone Lake. His vivid descriptions of the area's geothermal features, such as steaming hot springs and bubbling mud pots, left a lasting impression, and people began referring to the region as Coulter's Hell. The term captured the awe and mystery of these natural wonders, which were unlike anything most people had ever seen. Coulter's life took a dramatic turn in 1809 when he was captured by Blackfoot warriors. Stripped of his clothes and possessions, he was unexpectedly told he could go free. Initially, Coulter thought he had been granted an incredible stroke of luck, but he soon realized he was the target of a cruel sport. The warriors intended to hunt him down as he fled. As he ran for his life, Coulter managed to outmaneuver most of his pursuers. In a tense encounter with one of the warriors, Coulter was able to defend himself, using the man's spear to protect his life. Taking a blanket from the fallen warrior, Coulter then hid in a river, evading further pursuit. Over the following 11 days, Coulter embarked on a grueling journey back to safety, covering roughly 320 kilometers to reach civilization. With little more than bark and roots to sustain him, and only a blanket to keep warm, his survival was a testament to his incredible endurance and willpower. This harrowing experience convinced Coulter that it was time to leave the perilous life of the wilderness behind. He chose to return to the relative peace of settled life, where he could reflect on his extraordinary adventures. His experiences highlight the dangers faced by those who ventured into unknown lands, as well as the complex and often fraught interactions between different cultures during the early years of American exploration. Coulter's decision to leave the wilderness behind reflects the toll such a life could take, even on the most capable and seasoned frontiersmen. The shooting of David Lunt. One evening in January 1877, David Lunt found himself in a saloon in Deadwood, South Dakota, a bustling frontier town. Suddenly, a man, visibly intoxicated and filled with rage, stumbled into the establishment. The town marshal tried to intervene and calm the situation, but in the commotion, the drunken man's revolver went off. The bullet struck Lunt in the head. Remarkably, what would typically be a fatal injury did not immediately stop Lunt. To the amazement of everyone present, Lunt stood up, left the saloon, and made his way home, seemingly unfazed. Those who witnessed the incident were in disbelief as Lunt carried on with his daily routine, showing no signs of pain or distress despite the serious wound. For 2 months, Lunt continued his life as if nothing had happened. However, over time, he started to experience severe headaches. The pain became progressively worse, indicating that something was not right. Tragically, not long after these symptoms appeared, Lunt passed away. An autopsy was conducted to understand the cause of his death. It revealed that the bullet, while not killing him instantly, had caused a serious infection to develop in his brain. This infection, or abscess, had grown over time and eventually led to his death. David Lunt's story is a poignant reminder of the unpredictable nature of injuries during the frontier era. It also reflects the limited medical understanding and treatment options available at the time, particularly in remote and developing towns like Deadwood. The tragedy of the Donner Party. The story of the Donner Party is a tragic account of hardship, deprivation, and the extreme measures taken to survive. In 1846, a group of 89 individuals, led by Jacob and George Donner, departed from Springfield, Illinois, with hopes of a new beginning in California. Early in their journey, they encountered difficulties, including losses inflicted by the Paiute tribe, who either stole or killed many of their cattle. However, these initial setbacks were just the beginning of their trials. The party's attempts to find faster routes only compounded their problems. By October, they had not yet crossed the Sierra Nevada mountains, which stood between them and the relative safety of California. As heavy snowfall began to block their path, they were forced to establish a makeshift camp at Truckee Lake and endure the harsh winter conditions. As the season wore on, their food supplies dwindled, leading to severe malnutrition. The dire circumstances forced some members of the party to make the unthinkable choice of resorting to cannibalism, consuming the bodies of those who had died in order to stay alive. In a desperate bid for survival, a small group of fewer than 20 individuals, known as the Forlorn Hope, crafted rudimentary snowshoes and ventured out from the camp in search of help. Their journey was perilous, and only a few succeeded in crossing the mountains. The rest succumbed to the extreme cold, exhaustion, or starvation. The bodies of those who perished were used to sustain the remaining survivors. The rescue of the last group at Truckee Lake did not occur until April 1847. By then, fewer than 50 of the original 89 members were still alive. The ordeal of the Donner Party is a stark illustration of the unpredictable and often brutal challenges faced by pioneers traveling across uncharted territories. The Great Flood. The Great Flood of 1862 stands as one of the most devastating natural disasters in American history, profoundly impacting thousands of lives. This catastrophic event, triggered by an extraordinary combination of heavy rainfall and snowfall, persisted for over 40 days. To this day, it remains the largest flood ever recorded in California, Oregon, and Nevada, marking an unprecedented moment in each state's history. The sheer volume of water caused rivers to overflow, inundating vast areas of land and wreaking havoc on everything in its path. Entire communities were submerged, leading to the destruction of homes and infrastructure. The flood left countless people displaced, grappling with the harsh reality of survival in the wake of the disaster. While the flood resulted in relatively few fatalities compared to its scale, the economic consequences were staggering. The loss of livestock and the extensive damage to critical infrastructure created severe long-term challenges. Regions affected by the flood faced a prolonged recovery period, with some areas taking more than a decade to rebuild and stabilize. Many individuals and families struggled to regain their footing, and the economic hardship induced by the flood left lasting scars on the affected communities. The Great Flood of 1862 serves as a powerful reminder of the immense impact natural disasters can have on both the immediate and long-term well-being of communities. It underscores the vulnerability of even the most prepared societies to the forces of nature and the enduring resilience required to overcome such profound adversity. Buffalo Bill's first scalp for Custer. In 1876, Lieutenant Colonel George Custer and his troops faced a decisive defeat at the Battle of the Little Bighorn against a coalition of Lakota Sioux, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors. In the aftermath of this significant loss, William Frederick Cody, better known as Buffalo Bill, sought to retaliate for Custer's defeat. Cody made his way to Warbonnet Creek, where he launched an aggressive attack against Native American forces. During this confrontation, Cody killed a warrior identified as Yellowhair. In a dramatic gesture, Cody removed the warrior's scalp and declared, "The first scalp for Custer." His act of retribution was initially celebrated by American settlers who were eager for vengeance following the loss at Little Bighorn. However, as time has passed, Cody's actions have come to be viewed in a more critical light. Historical perspectives have cast his actions as extreme and excessive, reflecting the broader context of violent retaliation that marked the period. Cody himself later expressed regret about his conduct, acknowledging the moral complexities and the harshness of his actions. The Bisby Massacre. In 1883, a group of 5 armed men entered Bisby, Arizona, with the intention of robbing the local bank. They believed that the bank was holding a substantial payroll for the miners employed by the Copper Queen Mining Company. Unfortunately for the robbers, their timing was off. The payroll had not yet been deposited. With their primary target out of reach, the robbers took what they could and exited the bank. They soon found themselves in a fierce gunfight in the streets of Bisby. The violent confrontation resulted in the deaths of 3 townspeople and a pregnant woman, adding to the tragedy of the event. The gang managed to escape on horseback, but their flight was short-lived. John Heath, a prominent figure in the town, quickly organized a posse to track down the criminals. Despite their efforts, the posse was unable to capture the robbers. Eventually, through the diligent work of detectives, all 5 men were located and arrested. During their interrogations, they implicated a 6th individual, John Heath. It was revealed that Heath had allegedly acted as an inside accomplice, orchestrating the robbery from within. This accusation led to his trial. The 5 robbers were sentenced to death, and their execution remains the largest mass hanging in Arizona's history. Heath, tried separately, was initially sentenced to life imprisonment because the robbers had denied his involvement during the trial. Nonetheless, the townspeople were unsatisfied with this outcome. An angry mob stormed the prison, removed Heath, and threw him off a telegraph pole. Margaret Hanley Erskine. In 1779, a young woman named Margaret Pauley, who would later be known as Margaret Hanley Erskine, embarked on a journey with her husband and infant child from Virginia to Kentucky. They sought to build a new life on the American frontier. Tragically, their journey was interrupted when they were attacked by members of the Shawnee tribe. During the attack, Margaret's husband was fatally shot. The attackers also subjected Margaret to severe physical abuse, and in a devastating act, shot her baby in her presence. Margaret was taken captive by the Shawnees and spent the next 5 years living with them under harsh conditions. During her captivity, she gave birth to another child. Her survival was further tested when she narrowly escaped a violent attempt on her life by one of the tribesmen. Margaret's ordeal came to an end when frontiersmen who had been searching for captives found her and negotiated her release. They managed to purchase her freedom and return her to Virginia. Once back in her home state, Margaret eventually remarried and went on to lead a long life, despite the profound traumas she had endured. The Cholera Epidemic of 1873. In 1873, a devastating cholera epidemic swept across the United States, with frontier towns suffering the most due to their limited resources and inadequate sanitary conditions. These remote communities faced enormous challenges in managing and treating the illness, which was exacerbated by the lack of proper hygiene facilities. At the time, there was a prevalent belief among some that the epidemic had been introduced by migrants who initially arrived in New York and then moved westward. In Yankton, located in the Dakota Territory, Dr. J. B. Van Velsen characterized these migrants as having poor hygiene practices. He reported that they were resistant to adopting sanitary measures and often chose not to use proper toilets. Instead, they would relieve themselves near the buildings they occupied, contributing to the unsanitary conditions. Cholera was a particularly lethal disease, often causing rapid deaths among those infected. It had the capacity to decimate entire wagon trains or small settlements, with mortality rates reaching 50 to 60%. The severity of the outbreak often led towns to impose quarantines in an attempt to contain the spread of the disease. During the 18th and 19th centuries, it is estimated that thousands of settlers who ventured westward succumbed to diseases like cholera. This period of American expansion was marked not only by the pursuit of new opportunities, but also by the harsh realities of disease and the challenges of maintaining public health in burgeoning frontier communities. The cholera epidemic highlights the intersection of migration, public health, and the difficulties faced by early settlers in coping with the spread of infectious diseases. The true story of Hugh Glass. In 1823, trapper Hugh Glass faced a harrowing ordeal during an expedition in South Dakota when he was attacked by a bear. Although Glass managed to kill the bear, he sustained severe injuries, including a broken leg, a lacerated scalp, a punctured throat, and multiple deep cuts. His expedition companions, John Fitzgerald and Jim Bridger, assessed the situation and concluded that Glass would not survive. After several days, they made the difficult decision to bury him in a shallow grave, taking his weapons and leaving him behind, believing he was beyond saving. Contrary to their expectations, Glass was determined to survive. After regaining some strength, he embarked on a grueling journey back to civilization. Covering approximately 200 miles, this trek was arduous under the best of circumstances, but for someone in Glass's condition, it was a monumental challenge. His severe pain often forced him to crawl long distances, yet he persevered. Eventually, Glass reached safety and began his recovery. Driven by a desire for vengeance, he set out to find Fitzgerald and Bridger. However, upon locating them, he chose to forgive them instead of exacting revenge. This remarkable story of resilience and forgiveness inspired the 2015 film The Revenant, starring Leonardo DiCaprio. The film dramatizes Glass's extraordinary struggle for survival and his complex response to betrayal, shedding light on the harsh realities and personal trials faced by early American frontiersmen. As we've ventured through these haunting tales from the American Old West, it's clear that the frontier was as brutal as it was adventurous. Each story not only underscores the sheer grit required to survive, but also the dark shadows that accompanied the quest for fortune and a new life in the untamed frontier. If these grim stories captivated you and left you craving more, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Join us for more deep dives into the darker corners of history, where the past is as thrilling as it is chilling. Stay tuned for more riveting content and don't miss out on our next exploration into the mysteries of the Old West.